Alright, let's start building our space game. The first thing we need to do is import our required libraries. We're importing pygame, which is our game development library, and sys, which we'll use to properly exit our game when needed. Next, we're setting up our constants. Constants are values that won't change throughout our game, and it's a good practice to define them at the top. We're setting our screen width to 1280 pixels and our screen height to 720 pixels. This gives us a nice widescreen format that looks great for a space game. We're also defining our player dimensions. Our spaceship will be 80 pixels wide and 80 pixels tall, which is a good size that's not too big and not too small. The player speed is set to 7 pixels per frame, which means our spaceship will move 7 pixels every time we update the game. Finally, we set our FPS, or frames per second, to 60, which gives us smooth gameplay. Now let's talk about colors. In Pygame, colors are defined using RGB values, which stand for red, green, and blue. Each value ranges from 0 to 255. So, white is 255, 255, 255, because it's the maximum of all three colors. Black is 0, 0, 0, because it's the absence of all colors. Our blue color, which we'll use for our player, is 0, 100, 255, giving us a nice space blue color. Next, we initialize Pygame with pygame.init. This sets up all the Pygame modules we need. Then we create our game screen using pygame.displayed set_mode, passing in our screen width and height as a tuple. We also set our window caption, which is the title that appears at the top of the game window. The clock object is very important. It helps us control our game's frame rate, ensuring our game runs at a consistent speed on different computers. Now, let's create our player. For this first tutorial, we're using a simple rectangle to represent our spaceship. We'll upgrade to actual images in later tutorials. The pygame.Rect function creates a rectangle object. We position it in the center horizontally by using screen width divided by 2 minus half the player width. Vertically, we place it near the bottom of the screen. Here's where the magic happens, the game loop. Every game needs a main loop that keeps running until the player decides to quit. Our game loop has 4 main sections, and this structure is used in almost every game you'll ever see. First, we handle events. Events are things like key presses, mouse clicks, or closing the window. We check if the player clicked the X button to close the window, and if so, we set running to false to exit the loop. Second, we update our game state. This is where we check which keys are currently being pressed. We use pygame.key.get_pressed to get the current state of all keys. If the left arrow is pressed and our player isn't already at the left edge of the screen, we move the player left by subtracting from its X position. Similarly, if the right arrow is pressed and we're not at the right edge, we move right by adding to the X position. Third, we draw everything. We start by filling the screen with black to clear any previous drawings. Then we draw our player as a blue rectangle using pygame.Draw.Rect. We also add some helpful text to show the player what controls to use. Finally, we update the display with pygame.display.flip, which actually shows everything we've drawn on the screen. Then we use clock.tick FPS to maintain our desired frame rate. When the game loop ends, we properly quit Pygame and exit the program. And that's it. You now have a working game with a player that can move left and right. It might seem simple, but you've just learned the fundamental structure that every game uses. The game loop with event handling, updating, and drawing. In our next tutorial, we'll add some excitement by introducing falling asteroids that our player will need to avoid. But for now, try running this code, move your spaceship around, and get familiar with how it feels.